West coast of the United States woke up this morning, as my next guest soon will be doing, to the surprise announcement, surprise to some, of Julian Assange being arrested outside the Ecuadorian Embassy in London. And I'll be joined shortly by Scott Bennett to ask and answer the question, does this mean the end of Wikileaks, or is this perhaps the beginning of Julian Assange becoming the star witness in a Donald Trump pursuit of the deep state? Could this be a way of getting Julian Assange out of the embassy, extradited to the United States, where perhaps he'll receive witness protection to testify against the likes of Peter Strzok and all of the rogues in the FBI, who yesterday Attorney General William Barr said indeed did spy on President Donald Trump. Scott should be joining us any second. I'm pleased to have Scott with us today because, much like Mr. Assange, Scott was imprisoned for what he's told us were political motives. Scott is the author of Shell Game, and that is the story of terrorist financing coming through Booz Allen Hamilton, the Union Bank of Switzerland. I'm not sure why Scott's not answering. Let's see if we can get him on there now. People who watch the show regularly will recall that Scott has told us about his meeting with Swiss banker Brad Birkenfeld in jail, and this led to his writing Shell Game, which has been presented to members of Congress and all kinds of different people who seem to have done nothing with the information. I was just texting with Scott. I'm not sure what's going on with Skype here, but he should be with us any moment. Why don't we take a look at some footage coming out of London right now. Assange has been brought to a magistrate judge, I think. I'm not terribly familiar with the way the law works in England, but people who are regular viewers of Reverse Crime Scene Investigation with David Hawkins will recognize the logo on the side of this police van that is transporting Julian Assange outside Westminster magistrates after Assange was found guilty of skipping bail. That sounds like not an entirely huge, that sounds like not an entirely huge charge, but again, we don't know what fate awaits Mr. Assange as he is in the custody of authorities in the United Kingdom, something like 7 years after being in the embassy there of Ecuador. Hello, Scott.
Good to be with you, Jason. Sorry, we're having some computer issues.
No problem. Glad to have you with us. What we've been talking about, of course, is today's arrest of Julian Assange. And the question that I've posed is, do we think this is the end of WikiLeaks, or is this possibly Donald Trump finally rearing up and activating his defense against the deep state? We, of course, heard Attorney General William Barr yesterday accuse members of the Obama intelligence community of, in fact, spying on candidate Trump and doing all kinds of inappropriate things. To me, it makes sense that Trump could not have done anything with regard to helping Julian Assange while the Mueller probe was going on, or he would have been certainly accused of obstruction of justice and colluding with Russians or Australians or Ecuadorian British people or whatever. And what do you make of this, Scott?
Well, I think first of all, it's amazing. They've only charged him with conspiracy to hack into a computer with a 5-year prison sentence. They haven't charged him with espionage and a 20-year sentence. They've charged him with this minimal crime of conspiring to break into a computer. 5 years, and with no criminal history, he would get 1-2 years, if that. So this is an amazing gift as far as I'm concerned, and I don't necessarily equate it to the Trump administration because this was filed in 2008. So if that's all they charge him with, that's amazing, and it's also a tremendous sadness because he spent 7, 8 years in a embassy jail for more time than the charge would have carried. I mean, if he should have swung out of there on a rope like a pirate in the dead of night, as far as I'm concerned, and gone
Well,
out with a blaze of glory or some sort of Hollywood fanfare. But he did go out, yelling out, "You must resist." He went out to the embassy against his will. They had to carry him out, and he had a beard, so he was a little bit disheveled. But I think this is a tremendous gift. Now, how it's played politically is a delicate matter, of course, but all the cards are in the Trump administration's hand because Julian Assange was invited by the Senate to come testify, and he still can be. The Senate can command his attention, and I think Julian at this point would do so with bells and whistles, and after getting some good orange juice in the system and some rest and some sunshine, he would go to Capitol Hill and testify before the Senate and expose more. And I would love to be there because I would take shell game and all the WikiLeaks cables that he had given to Brad Birkenfeld disclosing Hillary Clinton's State Department pay-to-play operations with Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Algeria, Bahrain, the Union Bank of Switzerland, Robert Wolf, and the conspiracy that Loretta Lynch had with Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer, the Attorney General and the Assistant Attorney General, as well as Covington and Burling. That would be a dynamic opportunity to expose all of this, and it would reveal this toxic, dirty bomb that the Democrats know is now going off slowly. This is a slow-burning, dirty bomb that the Democrats are in agony over because it's revealing all of their corruption. You see that in the faces of people like Schumer and others, desperate to call names, desperate to call Barr a lackey and all of that. These people are, I mean, I always consider Democrat pathetic losers and schizophrenic, unstable people. But now they're even breaking that mold and becoming worse. I mean, this is a tremendous opportunity, I think, for Trump not to rush in to help Julian Assange. You can't do that because all the Democrats and everybody.
You just said Russian.
What's that? Oh, yeah, wine.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Scott, let me ask you a few questions because, you and I and many other guests on the show have had a lot of questions about William Barr, his role as the Attorney General in H.W. Bush administration and his previous relationship with Robert Mueller, although he does so far seem to be carrying out his role as Attorney General in accordance with the law. We have seen him hold back from releasing the Mueller report, not to protect Donald Trump, but to protect the innocent people who are brought before a grand jury to give testimony, and when there's a failure to find sufficient evidence to indict, those people, according to the Constitution, which I believe you and I hold quite dearly, are innocent. They have not been found, not even have they not been found guilty, there's insufficient evidence to even charge them. So we've seen mad lunatics like Adam Schiff and various so-called pundits, the Twitterati, demanding the release of this Mueller report, but it would be intensely unfair to people like Dr. Jerome Corsi and the various other individuals who were investigated probably unjustly and not charged. So what do we think Barr is going to do? And I agree with you, this is a bit of a gift that this charge of conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, relatively minor. That was the case pertaining to Bradley Manning, who is now Chelsea Manning, and the video footage that was released of U.S. forces shooting some journalists. There's also been a charge apparently of skipping bail. These seem like minor charges that a good lawyer could probably mitigate or even have no jail time. Maybe we've got the boy 26 who's a fan of ours in Philadelphia saying it's not a Trump move, it's a deep state move, but I don't know. I'm feeling kind of positive about this.
Yeah, I am too, Jason. I'm feeling positive. When I saw the charge, I thought, wow, that's nothing. I mean,
right.
This is again, this is how this is going to play out, of course, is Julian Assange is going to go to the British courts, and his lawyer should do as you prescribe. Maybe you ought to go up there and argue it for him. But he's going to say, look, I had to take asylum. I'd be killed. And the courts, the UN are going to weigh in. But I think at the end of the day, I'd like to see the UN and the British not extradite him out of principle. But we know the British and Theresa May are completely foppish puppets and have lost any dignity that they had 100 years ago as an empire. And they're going to send him over. And I've seen this happen to other people who are extradited and captured and kidnapped. And we've seen that just in the recent computer hacker who was grabbed in the Czech Republic and brought over here. The Czech Republic Court of Appeals ruled that his civil rights and his rights as a citizen were violated. Well, the U.S. still did it. They grabbed him and sent him over here. So they're going to bring Assange over. Now, Assange has to, at this point, conduct himself in a manner where he's the American people's best friend. And he is disclosing to them what they, in their heart of hearts, wanted. They want to know their transparent government. They want to know what is being done in their name and with their money. So he needs to say that at any opportunity he can. A 5-year sentence is really nothing. They'll probably, in fact, Jason, give him some sort of an offer in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement, and say something to the effect of, you cannot write or say anything about this, and we'll let you go in, like 6 months to a year or something. Well, I don't think he'd take that.
Yeah, let's not anticipate what kind of plea arrangements might be made, but certainly, a year in prison would be kind of like nothing compared to what he's done so far. These are nonviolent crimes. He would, if he did get sentenced in that regard, at least he'd get to play bocce and make friends with guys like Brad Birkenfeld, like you did. Now, Scott, deep state digital fish wrapper CNN.com is saying that Barr obliterates honest broker persona with spying comment. How ridiculous is this? CNN is so far off the mark.
Yeah, CNN and the deep state are panicking. They're drowning. They realize all of this is coming out, and again, it's a slow, dirty bomb. They've lost all credibility. Rachel Maddow's in the toilet. She's always been in the toilet, but now it's public news.
She's doing the backstroke in the commode.
Yeah, and all of them have lost their minds. I mean, Hannity had his montage, or I think maybe Tucker had his montage of all the other media stations, and above them all, I think Tucker's the best. I think Hannity goes off in the deep end, but Tucker is not bad. And they were showing CNN and MSNBC and all the usual clowns getting out of their Keystone Cop car, and they were all crying the same thing: Barr is bad, Barr is a puppet, Barr is a spy. Well, we may not, like him for the past and stuff, but we're scrutinizing him now, and I think he's a constitutional guy. I think he's going to, preserve the rights of the people contained in the Mueller report. He's going to, like you said, make sure nothing is released that's redacted, and I think they're going to use Julian Assange as the best witness the Trump administration could ever have,
right,
about what was the real material that you sought to disclose. And all the other material that WikiLeaks has disclosed, Jason, as I've said before in Shell Game, will naturally come to the forefront. This is the opportunity to bring in, through amicus curiae briefs, to anything that tries to charge Julian Assange. An amicus brief argues that the material he provided in my case, for example, in Brad Birkenfeld's case, was the key whistleblowing information that was disclosed to the United States government about illegal terrorist financing acts that were done by Hillary Clinton, which in part motivated his disclosure of Hillary Clinton, because he has seen her evil doings since 2012. Even before that, this happened in 2009. So I think they're going to slowly use Julian Assange. Now, Bradley Manning, or he changed his name to Chelsea Manning, but I still consider him,
You can't do that. You can't misgender somebody.
Yeah. Well, let me just focus on one thing. I wrote about this because I was in a lot of the same skiffs, and I did a lot of the same intelligence work. But of course, I was older, and I had been trained a little bit deeper and harder. But Bradley Manning has gone through things when he was in the military as an intelligence asset that nobody knows, and I can't talk about a lot of it, but What drove him over the edge as a young kid who was green behind the ears, he was enlisted, was seeing a lot of the video footage that was brought in to U.S. Central Command or these other downrange theaters, where he saw material that would be brought in by Mossad, some of the most horrific, graphic, horrifying videos of human torture that were interestingly brought in by Mossad that was blamed on Iraqis or other participants in theater, and that caused him to pop. That caused him to really.
Now, wait a minute. What are you saying? It's videos that they're people that Mossad was torturing. Why were they bringing in these videos? What's the purpose of that?
Blame them on the Iraqis and the Sunnis and the Iranians to justify continued military action and continued hatred and just to psychologically prop them up of these are the enemies of humanity based on what they're doing to other human beings. So it was an attempt to dehumanize the Iraqi population and specifically the Saddam military and the special forces. So I won't go into too much on that, but I just wanted to explain. Bradley Manning did not just change because he felt like it or turn in videos because he felt like it. He was in the material that you're exposed to. If you don't have good leadership and if you're not mature enough to be able to contain this, a lot of young soldiers just can't handle it. They really literally
the psychological pressure is too much.
You have never seen. I'll say this: the movie Hostel is a Charlie Brown Christmas special cartoon compared to the wire brushes, the grinding machines, the live video, the beheading, the live video, things that you'll never sleep again normally. You got to go hug a puppy after you see this stuff. And a lot of guys go to chain smoking, but you've never encountered things unless you've been over there and in the intelligence circles. And no one talked about that for Bradley Manning. And it really hit me when I understood who he was and where he was and what he was doing in the intel reviewing skiffs. And that's the worst place to be. And a young, confused kid, it just made perfect sense. And they still ignored that. But I just wanted to share a little bit about what he was exposed to and what he saw. But I won't go into too much. But I don't think he's going to testify against Julian Assange. I think, in fact, he's a good witness for Julian Assange, and as all of these people that have been using WikiLeaks or instrumental in WikiLeaks. From Bill Binney, he has talked about the download of the Russian, the download of the material that they tried to blame on the Russians. Bill Binney has said that was not physically possible. You cannot download material overseas at the rate that it was done. It was an inside job. It was someone putting a thumb drive, most likely, into the computer.
Well, but see, other people have challenged that allegation of Bill Binney, and when I asked him, how do we know that somebody didn't, download it over the internet and then write it to a thumb drive to explain that file allocation table, the files were all written in even numbered times, and I don't know that we ever got a good answer to that. So, there's evidence on both sides of it, but the fact of the matter is just the forensic digital evidence is insufficient to say that the Russians did it or the Russian government did it or that Trump and his campaign were anyway involved in it.
Well, the other thing to consider in that, and I would agree, we don't know everything. We just have to speculate and calculate as much as we can with the engineering and technological tools that we have. But we also recognize that the U.S. CIA had hacking technology that gives the fingerprints of other governments performing those jobs.
I mean, that's obvious, isn't it?
And and they have the moral character, the moral decadence of character to perform these sort of things. And I'm not harping or bad mouthing the CIA or the intelligence agencies or the military. I have a lot of friends that still work in there, and I worked a lot with them. But I am harping on the corrupt. The corrupt, soulless actors in the agencies and the military who have been continuing to double down on this world obsession conquest mission where everybody is a whack-a-mole and we're the hammer. This is the unconstitutional betrayal of our country that will lead us and has led us into absolute ruin. and that needs to be broken. That's why people voted for Trump in the first place.
Yeah.
Now,
Now,
whether
Scott,
Trump
let me ask you
abandons
this,
that,
because we've got some commenters. We've got W. Rain telling us that the chief financial officer, I think it's the chief technology officer of CrowdStrike, who is a Russian expatriate named, I think, Dmitry Alperovich, he's saying it was the Russians. But again, that's not the FBI. There's a lot of questions as to why this private cyber security firm would be investigating this material rather than the FBI. And of course, this is the same firm that James Comey referred to as a trusted third party. I think a lot of people have questions why the likes of Robert Mueller, James Comey, Rod Rosenstein, Andrew McCabe failed to investigate all kinds of financial crimes related to the Clinton Foundation, including those that you outline, the terrorist financing and other aspects that you outline in your book, Shell Game, which people can buy by going to shellgamewhistleblower.com. Why should we trust CrowdStrike or Dmitry Alperovich? It seems more likely that William Barr is correct and people like this were conspiring with Comey, Rosenstein, McCabe, Strzok, Page, to spy on Trump.
well, Jason, let's be very simple. In a sense, it doesn't matter who did it, because what is more important is the moral depravity, the decadence, the criminality that was exposed and suggested in the child pedophilia suggested in the Podesta emails and its links to Barack Obama with Pizzagate and pasta and the
strange coded language that seems to correspond to FBI known codes for child trafficking.
Yes, let's really get serious. This is they're trying to say, well, somebody did this bad stuff. They snuck in and they got this material. Well, what did they get? Well, they got child pornography material that government officials like Hillary Clinton, Nuba Abedin, and Barack Obama and his transgender Michael Robinson wife thing may have been participating in.
Do we have evidence to support that Barack Obama was participating in child trafficking? Let's be careful.
Well, one of the accusations was that they flew in hot dogs and pizza from Chicago, and that doesn't happen.
$65,000 for hot dogs.
Yes.
I do remember hearing that. So that is strange. That could be a typo, but I agree with you. I think there were definitely statements that came out in those Podesta emails that warranted further investigation. There are a lot of people, I think, who jump to conclusions based on that. And again, I want us to be very careful, because something that I've observed, Scott, is that, I think it was last week that Alex Jones was deposed on video, and they were talking a lot about Sandy Hook. Now, you and I did a very comprehensive video where we looked at video evidence related to the New Zealand mosque shooting in Christchurch. And I want to encourage people to go over to patreon.com/shellgame or to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We've posted the video there. And, what I've observed, Scott, is that the social engineers who operate in social media want to take an event like a mass shooting and attach false evidence to it to try to entice people like you or I or Alex Jones to jump to a conclusion based on that false evidence and then say, oh, look, see, this independent journalism is dangerous. Someone puts out something in Pizzagate, or we look in John Podesta's emails and he's emailing people back and forth about Dominoes with cheese on them, which on the face of it makes no sense. And what I say is that's odd. We should be asking John Podesta more questions about that, questioning what this is all about. Is this a code language? Is this typos? Is this autocorrect errors? What have we got there? But the problem becomes people jump to conclusions, and then perhaps a false piece of evidence is inserted that you or I or Alex Jones or somebody else reports on that gives them sort of a trigger to pull us off the internet. So I want to be really careful about what we say and not jump to any conclusions. And the other thing I wanted to raise, Scott, a principle in law that I'm discovering from a lawsuit that I'm defending pro se, we must take what the plaintiff offers, if it's plausible, initially as true until it can be disproven. So the notion of a mass shooting at a school or a mosque, it's plausible, so let's presume it's true. Now, even if we have evidence that suggests something impossible happened on this video, that doesn't negate the entire event. So that's what I want us to be careful of.
Well, in finishing up, besides the suggestions of the improper behavior of Podesta and these others, more than improper, of course, criminal, I would also say the other material that, of course, was grabbed and reported by the computer hacks was of the greatest criminal racketeering operation in the history of the United States.
Right.
With, again, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer running this pay-to-play operation in the State Department, overthrowing the Libyan government in the NATO bomb strikes, and continuing to run the weapons up through Turkey into Syria. Those are facts that have caused Americans to die. And that is what is the most important contribution that WikiLeaks and others have reported in these communications by the State Department. So I don't care who did it. I care about, because I was military, what they exactly did, and their lies aren't going to escape them. Now, the other that'll come to fruition. I think it's all going to play out. This is, again, the dirty bomb. No one in any Democrat circle can stand against Julian Assange. He's a very smart guy. He's a very good talker, and I think it would be the greatest thing since the Iran-Contra hearing, if not the Watergate hearing, for Julian Assange to appear before the United States Senate and say, "Let me tell you something, Senator. Let me tell you something, Congressman," and really hit them right between the legs in a way that turns their cheeks purple. And I think he'll do that. Now, the New Zealand thing you mentioned, that was probably one of the best videos ever done on New Zealand. I think we hit it right out of the park. And I'll say this: I didn't personally, when I first instantly saw the video, and I downloaded it very quickly because I knew it was going to be scrubbed, and it was. But when I watched that over and over and over and over again, slowly, as I know you did, and I simply analyzed from my personal professional experience in the military how weapons systems, bullets react to the human body and the environments around them and the sound and all of that. And based on my analysis of that physical occurrence with weapons and bodies, I came to the conclusion no bullets were being fired into bodies
in this
video.
Correct.
In this video. That's all that matters, Jason.
Doesn't mean that there wasn't a mass shooting in Christchurch, however, because what we usually hear with these events... Hang on. We got to stick to that principle of law. If we're in the United States, what I would like to do, at least on this show, is basically appreciate everyone's right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, and the plaintiff's right to make a plausible claim and have it be presumed to be true. Now, someone in the comments objected to my statement that was something written in John Podesta's email an autocorrect error. I mean, again, the danger of, we don't control YouTube. We say something that violates the community terms of service. They're just waiting for the opportunity to strike a video, to take a video down, to stop you or I from being able to do this. So we've got to speak very carefully, and also not just for selfish reasons. You don't want to be wrongly accused. I don't want to be wrongly accused, and therefore we must respect even despicable individuals like John Podesta's right to be considered innocent until proven guilty. So we must explore every possibility, not just presume that because something weird or creepy is written in his email, or because GQ nominates James Alefantis as a pizzeria owner to be the 49th most powerful man in the most powerful city in the world. No matter how implausible that is, even if we see a photograph of James Alefantis with David Brock, even if we see a photograph of James Alefantis with David Brock and Linda Rothschild, even if we see emails between Hillary Clinton and Linda Rothschild that seem like Hillary Clinton is being an enormous sycophant, we still need to preserve these people's rights to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, and we also want to preserve our credibility as not just jumping to conclusions. So I think what's most plausible is that when a mass shooting like that happens, they want to give out false evidence, and they want to do things like arrest people like Vinnie Eastwood in New Zealand and have, who was it? It was Rahm Emanuel who said, never let a crisis go to waste, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
there's an opportunity there to silence Alex Jones if they can get him saying things that are controversial and all that kind of stuff. And I want us to avoid that fate. You can always tell the pioneers by the arrows in their back. And I think Alex Jones was a pioneer, and that deposition was not so good for him.
Yeah. Well, the virtue is we're analyzing simply material that has already been put up and is circulating. So it's not like we're knocking on doors or digging up or hacking into systems or opening wallets. We're simply observing what's out there.
Right.
And I think that's a defense that Alex Jones should put forth. He didn't do anything in the Sandy Hook Posner issue. He's simply responding and analyzing that and exercising his constitutional right to speak and question and analyze things that are already being said and put forth by others, whether it's Wolfgang Halbig or James Fetzer or others. So you have to really.
Well, Jim Fetzer's another guy who jumps to conclusions, I'm sorry to say. I know you and he have a good relationship, and I admire his willingness to question everything. But again, I don't think he is using discernment. He's told me that holograms hit the World Trade Center. I mean, I think we agree that the official story doesn't make sense and cannot be proven by science. But again, we can't jump to conclusions. Let me take you back to Julian Assange for a second, Scott, because he's been in prison there in the embassy for 7 years. The UN said it was a violation of his human rights. He's looking more like Papa Smurf or Santa Claus now than, his health has been affected. I mean, I think there is a strong argument to be made that particularly given the ruling of the UN that he was wrongfully imprisoned, a 5-year sentence could be commuted on time served, couldn't it?
Yeah, that's a very good point. It could be. They could say, you've served 7-8 years in a prison already. The judge is going to take that into consideration and give you time served, and let the government appeal it. But he'd be released instantly and could return to wherever he wanted. I would, of course, Ecuador looks like a bunch of clowns at this point. They look like the banana republic that everybody suspects some of these Central American countries are. Julian Assange, I never liked the idea of him going to Ecuador. He should have went to Russia, or he should have went to, somewhere that was
then the Russian collusion thing would have been like open and shut.
Well, it would have, but you know what? He was thinking he was going to be looking at 18 years, if not death, and he should have. He should have gone over there. I don't believe the Russian collusion thing in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't fit the model of anything to benefit. And I think it was invented by MI6, CIA, Mossad. I think they are the ones who want continued antagonism between Russia and the United States. Putin is playing this and has always been playing this very, very subtly and quietly and gently. Putin is not provoking a reaction. He is not antagonizing NATO or the West. He sees NATO and the West and America as a schizophrenic meltdown block. Everyone is coming apart at the seams. They're desperate to try and invent a Russian enemy, and that's why he's not becoming that. He's keeping his hands off the hot potato. He's not even abusing Ukraine as he could in defense of Donbass. Ukraine is another thing that just happened. You saw, I think, Poroshenko lose the majority of the election votes because of the people there seeing the government as a corrupt puppet of the West and NATO and John McCain and Biden. This Ukraine thing could really come back to haunt Biden and Obama and all these clowns, Victoria Nuland and everyone that orchestrated the overthrow of Yanukovych. And
let's go back to South America for a second, Scott, because do we know why Assange selected Ecuador? There's something going on where a loan was given to Ecuador to release Assange. Is there anything going on with Venezuela and Ecuador, or immigration to the U.S. southern border through Ecuador? Why would the U.S. give this money to Ecuador, and what does it have to do with Assange?
Well, I think it probably has everything to do with Assange. I think Pence and these other neocons like Mike Pompeo, who's labeled WikiLeaks a foreign intelligence service, and I think Pompeo is a grand idiot. I think all of these people who are around Trump are idiots, and quite honestly, it makes Trump look like an idiot to have him in there. There are so many better people. Hell, he could have hired me to run Homeland Security, and there would have been a new sheriff in town that makes Clint Eastwood look like an altar boy. I would have been running the whole operation, and you would have no one coming over the border. And I don't mean acting draconian or violent, but there are ways to handle and manage government agencies, and I know that. No one up there knows how to manage anything. They're all up there for their own theatrics.
Trump seems pretty positive on Pompeo.
Well, that doesn't give him any credit in my eyes. I mean, this whole 4Chess, QAnon, and all this crap, as I consider it, I don't believe or buy any of this stuff. I don't trust anybody. I trust my own eyes and my own ears, and the optics are bad for Trump all over the place. This is his election to lose if he starts picking fights or getting us quagmired into wars, and the America making America great and doing the tax cuts and generating revenue and jobs and cutting down the wall. I'm all for that. But the moment you start picking up regime changes in Venezuela and Syria and doubling down, and now you're labeling the Iranian Republican Guard as a terrorist organization, so they have to label all U.S. soldiers as terrorists. That could result in a lot of Americans getting killed or swatted or run over by psychopaths in these Muslim countries. It's a losing initiative. So Trump doing this isn't smart foreign policy as far as I'm concerned. And this isn't me talking. This is Phil Giraldi and Mike Maloof and people who've been in the inner circles of foreign policy. Peter Van Buren, all of us were talking about. Trump needs to win the hearts and minds of these countries, not pull out the saber and start wielding over his head and scaring the hell out of everybody. And that's what he's been doing. And
well, he's also got to be thinking about 2020, Scott. And certainly if Trump's Justice Department takes major action against Julian Assange, a lot of people who voted for Trump because he was the foil to the mainstream media, the foil to the mainstream politics, I think he would experience a pretty dramatic collapse in support if he doesn't support Julian Assange in the way that you and I are discussing. I want to ask you this, because going back to Chelsea Manning, I'm not sure what to make of this. Of course, just before he left office, Barack Obama, who I think we both agree on, we won't go into that right now, but he commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence. So why would Barack Obama and his Justice Department seemingly, pull back from being harsh in its treatment of Chelsea Manning, and we still have this sort of lingering charge, the conspiracy charge against Assange? It's a conspiracy to hack the DoD password that allowed Manning to access the material. And that's very interesting because these legal things are really complicated. A lot of people have often cited the Pentagon Papers, New York Times versus, who was it? The guy's name is escaping. Right, Daniel Ellsberg versus the New York Times. Now, this is a wrinkle to that because, of course, Assange did publish the material, but if in some way he provided advice as far as hacking a password, perhaps he is complicit in stealing the material, which is significantly different than what Daniel Ellsberg did with regard to the New York Times. He just handed over a stack of paper. Yeah.
Well, that is the one tiny thread that they could pull on, but I think he would. I think he could fight it off. Again, let's come back. I don't think a jury is going to find Julian Assange guilty of anything. I think a jury is going to acquit him because of all of this has affected every American citizen has been affected by this, and every American looks at Julian Assange. And I think the majority of them, 50, you just need one person to say, nope, he's not guilty. One person to say, OJ didn't do it. I don't care about the blood and the glove. He didn't do it. They're going to say,
wait a minute. They could invoke some of these post 9/11 type things, and they could classify him as a intelligence operative, a foreign combatant. And
Not now they can't. Now they can't. They've made the indictment public. They filed it in 2008, conspiracy for computer intrusion. You can't change that, and you can't go back and do double jeopardy and attach Bradley Manning to Assange. That's why he didn't testify, is because of double jeopardy and also his right to the Fifth Amendment. He's not going to position himself to be prosecuted. That's Manning's argument, and in a sense now he can be called by Julian Assange as a defense witness, like Brad Birkenfeld can, like Scott Bennett can, like everybody under the sun who has utilized WikiLeaks for major government whistleblowing operations that have served a purpose and revealed government unconstitutional actions, which may include treason. So Julian Assange could be elevated by the fountain that is about to be unleashed, not drowned by it. And the charge is relatively nothing. I think you're right. Trump has to pardon him if things go sour before 2020 or commute his sentence. But I don't think he will because, again, if it's a 5-year term and they kick off, they can't hold him. And I don't think Trump's going to hold him for 2 years. I think he's going to want to get this. You've had 8 years, 7 years to get this indictment ready. Now you're going to go to court. Right now, you're not going to introduce new evidence either. You can only introduce the evidence that you had at the time of the indictment to present to the jury. You can't have, newly discovered evidence to add to this. You have to take it at the time of the charge. What did Julian Assange do? And that's all you can charge him with. So intrusion into a government computer, by him exercising his constitutional right to speech, which all people are recognized now as having a constitutional right in a sense, to say to Bradley Manning, yeah, whatever you want to send me, I'll take. Try this number, try that number. He could say, I was exercising my right. Somebody asked me, hey, Scott, I want to hack into a system. Well, I don't know. Try any number you want. You're not going to say you're a part of a conspiracy. I'm exercising my right to speak. I don't know what the person's doing. I'm not in the room.
We don't know the details of what may or may not have been done. I mean, my fear, of course, is that they can sometimes, from a legal standpoint, sort of do whatever the hell they want, despite the Constitution and all those other things. Now, that list of people who used WikiLeaks to whistleblow on government corruption would have to include Donald Trump, right? He told us quite a lot about how much he loved WikiLeaks. He read about it.
By him exercising his constitutional right to speech, which all people...
Sorry, I was trying to let us hear Donald Trump there, but I've got the sound on you as well. But, he even said he loves WikiLeaks as far as I recall.
I'm not reading it to you, but the hell with it. Just trust me, it's real bad stuff.
Talk about Hillary Clinton and all of her emails and everything. Well, that didn't work out well with the sound, but this is what happens when you do a show without an engineer. Trump relied on WikiLeaks.
He was political rhetoricizing, if you will. It was political rhetoric. It was during the campaign, and everybody loves WikiLeaks. I don't know anybody who doesn't, other than the deep state agents that profit by keeping people fearful.
People who watch the mainstream news, I think, believe the narrative that Assange is a spy or something like that. Mike Pompeo certainly wants to charge him. John Brennan, deep state, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, Trump and all of the utility of WikiLeaks. Look, I think we talked about it before. WikiLeaks has given the American people a gift that they would never have had Trump had it not been for WikiLeaks.
And we wouldn't know the details of the crimes of the Clintons and all of the international governments that colluded.
That's right. The enormous truth about what was being done in our name at our government computers using our government taxpayer dollars to throw Americans in jail, engineer pay-to-play operations, overthrow countries, start wars, and expand this juggernaut of American conquest and dominance, which is the opposite of everything that America stands for and everything Americans want. We would never have known that outside of WikiLeaks. And nobody, the saddest thing, Jason, is nobody in the American Congress has the stones and the gumption, the moxie or the language to speak like that in a political arena to say, Julian Assange, I want to thank you for being one of the greatest heroes of America in the history of our country. You're Paul Revere. You're saying the deep state is coming. The deep state is coming as you're running through town with your lantern. And we heard you. And I think you need to be completely exonerated. And I think there's no, the American jury of your peers will exonerate you. But failing that, you need to be issued a pardon by the United States Congress for what you did. This was not a guy penetrating as a hacker into American systems to do bad. This was a news organization on the internet, which was consistent with the spirit of the times, that is revealing deep corruption. And yes, you have military snafus. I've seen a lot. You've got helicopters killing journalists and all this stuff. That happens. Is it
Ooh.
problematic and inconvenient? Yeah, but it's not a conspiracy to overthrow the United States. It's simply
Well, let's talk
revealing.
about that for a second, because I want to take you to this email here. It's amazing to me that they're talking about, did Julian Assange help Chelsea Manning, or was he Bradley Manning at the time, with a password or something like that, when the email that was revealed is Hillary Clinton saying that we need to use our diplomatic and more traditional intelligence assets to bring pressure on the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which are providing clandestine financial and logistical support to ISIL. So we've got the Secretary of State who knows and is admitting in writing that basically allies of the United States government are funding and providing logistical support to the enemy that we're at war with, that are causing these journalists to be shot because we have our armed forces engaged, that are causing your colleagues in the military, your former colleagues, to be shot and killed and injured. I mean, this is just phenomenal here, that Hillary Clinton has faced no, she wasn't locked in an embassy in Chappaqua for 7 years. This is astounding. How can people ignore this type of email, Scott, and focus on what Chelsea Manning or Julian Assange or any of these guys did? I feel like we could be, when it comes to draining the swamp, Julian Assange is the roto-rooter man.
Yes. See, that's the ironic twist here, Jason. I think we're entering a twilight time in American media and political life that is going to resemble that old biblical story of Haman being hung by his own gallows in the book of Esther. Mordecai was, the Jew, and Esther was married to the king. And
You're talking Purim.
Yeah, I can't remember all how the details work, but the bad guy, the prime minister, was trying to kill all the Jews by creating a scaffold and a hangman's noose. And he was the one actually who was hung by his own gallows at the end of the day. And I think that's going to happen to all of the Democrats, especially Schiff and Schumer and all of these clowns, and Hillary Clinton too. And the email that you're identifying, that came out, I believe, in September, August of 2012. That was after Brad Birkenfeld's revelations about Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all these Muslim countries sending and funneling Swiss bank money into nonprofits and entities to fund their jihad. This was after we sent the report to James Mattis at U.S. Central Command on August 1st, 2012. This was after we sent it to General Michael Flynn at Defense Intelligence Agency and General Jeff Jacobs of U.S. Civil Affairs Psychological Operations Command at Fort Bragg. So Hillary Clinton's statement about Qatar and Saudi Arabia came after our revelations. It's very true, but this could have all been stopped in 2009 when Brad had this material originally, and if we had met outside of a federal prison, it would have been scuffed. Of course, it would have been contained in SCIF. But this is precisely the material that implicates Hillary Clinton as part of a larger conspiracy to use Qatar and Saudi Arabia in a mercenary jihad to spread up through Syria with ultimate ambitions of going against Iran. That's the whole purpose of the Saudi Arabian NATO that I think is being try to be cobbled together with an Arab Middle East alliance against terrorism. I think it's all going to fall apart, and it's already started to. Egypt is pulled out because every country recognizes Saudi Arabia as a schizophrenic nation that is hijacked Mecca and Medina, does not represent Islam, beheads boys, rapes women, kills journalists, and is seen as one of the greatest terrorist states imaginable. It's backed by the United States because of the petrodollar. It's backed because of our
well, I think it almost has the United States kind of. The script is a little bit flipped. We're beholden to Saudi Arabia because of the petrodollar and their buying of all the treasury, all the debt and all that. We've got people in the comments here, Scott, saying that the irony is that WikiLeaks revealed the real international collusion, and it's some of the things that you're talking about right now. It's stunning how we have people in Congress like Adam Schiff and Schumer and all these guys who are so desperate to just get Trump out of the way. They would love to, as Hillary Clinton suggested, just drone Julian Assange and cover all these things up and keep getting their payments of millions. Adam Schiff is every day tweeting nonsense and crap about this and that other thing. We have not heard one thing about him demanding an investigation in his own congressional district into the 2 deaths related to illegal drugs at the home of Democratic mega donor Ed Buck. So Adam Schiff is not at all interested in any evidence-based investigations, but just conducting investigations, or rather arriving at conclusions based on what he knows. Eric Swalwell has tried to convince everyone watching CNN that he knows there was collusion. Don't pay any attention to what Imran Awan was doing when he was employed in Congress. We're going to go after Donald Trump. So I'm remaining positive about what's going on with Julian Assange so far, in part because of the points that you're raising as far as, these charges that have come up not being espionage, not being life sentence type things, possibly being able to be commuted. He's got a lot of lawyers. Someone else in the comments earlier mentioned that his lawyer was seen on video actually smiling. So
yeah, I would be too. This is a gift, Jason. This is a tremendous gift. It's nothing. It's absolutely the best thing you could want, because he has a chance to go into court. He can he could defend himself and say anything and everything. He won't, but in one sense, this needs to become theatrical for him, because he can redeem his entire name, expose everybody and everything. He should go to Congress and testify. The Trump administration should arrange for back channels with him to say, please come and testify to the United States Senate. You can say you don't like Trump, you think he's a buffoon if you want, but that's fine. We just want you to talk about what you found and what else you found and what you haven't reported that the American people need to know. And, don't go off on helicopters killing Iraqi journalists. We know that happened. Shit happens in war. But we want to know the deeper corruption. In the State Department and the Department of Justice were throwing American citizens in jail to cover up their pay-to-play operations. We want to know the real crimes and scandals that should execute people for treason in the State Department and the CIA and the different agencies. And because this is a harm to America. This was a communist takeover attempt that we're trying to roll back. And I think the Democrats get the sense of that momentum. The tsunami is going back now against them. Barr is going against them. He's going to now, again, we don't have to invent anything.
Well, he's
Jason.
not going against them. He's going with the rule of law, is what it seems like.
Right.
So,
well, that's right. That's right.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Scott, but you're uniquely suited out of all the guests that I have on Crowdsource the Truth to talk about this situation that Julian Assange now faces, because you yourself, we've got over 1,000 viewers right now, which is really good viewership for the middle of the day. I think a lot of people are interested in what's going on. Why don't you just real quickly in the last few minutes that we've got, remind everyone about your situation after you wrote the book Shell Game, which people can purchase at shellgamewhistleblower.com, how you got railroaded in court, didn't even realize what was going on, and what you think you would do differently, or if you were in Assange's situation, knowing now what you did not know. And tell us about what the charges were and when this all happened to you.
Well, I'll say, Shell Game Whistleblower has the Wikileaks cables that Julian Assange disclosed to Brad Birkenfeld, proving Hillary Clinton and the State Department were involved in terrorist financing with Switzerland, with Robert Wolf, chairman of the Americas of UBS, who's always on Fox, and Lanny Brewer and Eric Holder, who are the Attorney General and Assistant Attorney General. All of this came to Brad Birkenfeld when he was a Swiss bank whistleblower. He tried to bring it over to the United States, and he was thrown in jail for it. I was doing terrorist financing. I was railroaded with a false statement charge.
You mean you were investigating terrorist financing?
Yeah, I was investigating. Well, I was doing military counterintelligence operations.
So you were actually involved in the financing of the terrorism on behalf of the Army?
I won't go into too much what I was doing, but I was doing everything and anything on both sides, up and down and
Wow.
in between, regarding money and terrorism and their operations and such in
Wow.
U.S. Central Command. So when I started finding out Hillary Clinton, Saudi Arabia links, and Clinton Foundation, and other things that I won't go into, but I was doing reports and giving briefings on a lot of this. I found myself stopped at a front gate and charged with DUI that was thrown out because it didn't exist, but they used that to leverage and say, we've done some background in you. Your housing form wasn't filled out correctly, so we're moving you from base, firing you from Booz Allen Hamilton, so keep your mouth shut or else things will get bad. And about 8 months later, they charged me with making a false statement on a housing form. The first time in the United States history this has ever happened to a military officer in a civilian court in Florida. And Judge Virginia Hernandez Covington, related to the firm Covington and Burling that represents UBS in Saudi Arabia and others, was the judge. And Donna Shalala's nephew was made my attorney. Didn't represent me, threw me under the bus. I get sent on a bus going out to California. The White House and God redirect it, send me to Pennsylvania, and I run smack dab into Brad Birkenfeld. Brad Birkenfeld, who was the hottest whistleblower that nobody knew about, had WikiLeaks cables and Swiss bank accounts and Middle Eastern financiers, all part of his case, and he shared it all with me. And I sat down with him and went through this stuff for 6 months. And then I put a military cover page on it and sent it to James Mattis, U.S. Central Command, U.S. Special Operations Command, General Flynn at DIA, Jacobs, Dempsey, Joint Chiefs of Staff, Armed Services Committees, Intelligence Committees, Foreign Relations Committees, Government Oversight Committees, everybody you can imagine. And it's all contained in shell game. You see the letters written on a prison typewriter. And I'm working in prison. It was the most bizarre writer's experience you could have. But meeting Brad Birkenfeld and the WikiLeaks cables that Julian Assange gave was the greatest revelation, and it will be the greatest crime that Hillary Clinton and these actors will be stung by. And Donald Trump was given a copy of it. So this is all going to begin coming out now. That's why I'm excited that Julian Assange is out. And I'm doing backflips when I see him charged with conspiracy to break into a computer. That's in 5 years.
Rather than espionage or something.
Yeah. And I mean, it is the golden goose that will just do a diarrhea of coins, because he will get up there and testify. And I think the Republicans should make him their champion to say, tell us everything, and we're going to petition. We, as the United States Senate, are going to ask for all these charges to be dropped or leniency to be given, because he's done the best thing for Americans. And suddenly it all turns against the Democrats. Democrats now become the party of silence the whistleblowers and silence the crimes of the deep state, where the Republicans are bring out more whistleblowers to reveal the deep state that came against Trump. And Adam Schiff and Schumer and Feinstein are the chief cheerleaders for this demonic football team.
Yeah, they really seem, there's a sense of desperation, Scott, and I'm glad you're saying this, because you and I didn't get a chance to speak before the show, and I sort of was thinking all this, but you've got much more firsthand experience and direct contact with this type of information, so it's reassuring to hear it from you. Now is really the time, I think, for people who haven't read Shell Game to go to shellgamewhistleblower.com and purchase the book. This is going to detail all of the information that Scott is talking about, the terrorist financing, the connections between Booz Allen Hamilton and UBS. And this is a whistleblower report from the inside, as Scott said, written on a prison typewriter. I'm glad that you reminded us that the judge was Virginia Hernandez Covington. I did not even remember that, but the fact that she's directly connected to Covington and Burling, that is so scary. And our former Attorney General Eric Holder, other books that guests of Crowdsource the Truth have written have alleged that he is extremely corrupt. This is a man who said that his primary job was protecting Barack Obama, which is incorrect. The primary job of the Attorney General is to uphold the law of the United States of America. I also also find it interesting that when you put in Virginia Hernandez Covington and Eric Holder, I'm getting pictures of you, not pictures of the two of them together. So it's very interesting to see how Google responds to some of these searches. Scott, we're almost out of time for today, so I just want to remind people, if they haven't yet visited patreon.com/shellgame, they should go over there and they can see a lot of the exclusive videos that you and I have done together, our investigation into some of the video evidence related to the New Zealand Christchurch mosque shooting. You've got all of our interviews posted on there, as well as other interviews that you're doing in Truth versus News and the other appearances that you're doing around the internet. People can also go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and get a litany of subscriber-only exclusive content on there. Scott, anything you want to close with before we wrap it up?
I think this is exciting times. I would just simply say, too, Tulsi Gabbard has made some Twitter feeds where she's giving proclamations of being the candidate for peace and stopping these regime change and things like that. I said from the very beginning, she's going to continue to do that, and she may very well become the Democrat candidate based on that peace position. Everybody else will fall apart. And if she is, and Trump falls into a quagmire, it could be hers to pull ahead by a nose and win if people are so turned off by some international conflict that Bolton and these others push Trump into. I hope it's not the case, but just keep an eye on that, because this is something I think global peace, or the absence of global regime change in these operations, are going to be the determining factor from the next presidential election, not necessarily the economy and all that stuff. That's sort of on autopilot. But
Wow.
that's the one thing. And also how Trump reacts to Julian Assange. You're right, Jason. If he backstabs Julian Assange and turns, he's seen as a hypocrite, and everybody will hate him like, oh, my God, you loved him on the campaign trail, and now you hate him? You're a piece of garbage. He needs to get behind and support Julian Assange, and he also needs to get rid of Pompeo and Bolton.
So, I mean, maybe I don't even need to ask this, but if it's Trump Gabbard 2020, which way are you going on that?
Well, I would vote Trump, of course. I think a Republican is always better than the Democrats, just based on their schizophrenia and their moral delusion and their fantasies of the Green New Deal and transgender sexuality as being, you're the caterpillar turning into a butterfly, whatever you want to be. I mean, those are the core disintegrations of a society, and Democrats have that as their nature. Republicans don't. And yes, Republicans fail. You got some bad people, but I always say they're better than the Democrats, except when it comes to this war thing. They've been pushing us for 20 years, and it's been a complete disaster for the Republican Party in America. But I hope and pray that Trump gets revelation and gets a change of heart, and continues to honor the promises he made to the American people, which was ending the regime change, wars all over the place, and focusing on America. That wins. And that's what Tulsi Gabbard is saying. If they became vice president, I don't think that would happen. But Jim Fetzer has said if they did, they would win hands down. But
I think it would have to be a hologram of Tulsi Gabbard for that to happen. With that, Scott, we'll keep our eyes on what happens with Julian Assange. Thanks so much for joining me again. And everyone can tune in later tonight at 7 p.m. on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We're going to have the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp. Scott, I'll see you next week. Thanks very much for that great insight, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Jason.